Marry me, Gabriella. Those 3 words changed everything. But let me tell you how I got here. How a simple assistant ended up being proposed to by one of the most dangerous men in the city. 8 months ago, I walked into Alexander Pellegrini's office thinking it was just another job. I was wrong. Dead wrong. He was a man whose name made powerful people nervous. A man who owned half this city and controlled the other half. A man who looked at me like I was already his, long before I even knew it myself. The night everything changed, I wore a burgundy silk dress he had secretly sent to my apartment. That same night, I danced with the wrong man. And Alexander Pellegrini doesn't share what he considers his. What happened next? It nearly got us both killed. This story is for every woman who's ever felt invisible, until the right person finally saw her. It's about finding strength you didn't know you had, and discovering that love doesn't always come wrapped in safety. Sometimes, the most dangerous choice is the one that saves you. If you've ever had your heart broken, or wondered if you'd ever find someone who truly sees you, stay until the end. This one's for you. The schedule for Alexander Pellegrini was my entire world. In 8 months as his assistant, I learned that being precise was not a preference. It was how you survived. Every meeting and every call was a test. Tonight's annual party at his estate was another display of their power, camouflaged as a simple gathering. My friend Amanda texted me. She wanted to have lunch, but I knew I would cancel. Answering her questions about my life had become impossible. Our friendship was fading, starved of the truth I could not share. Miss Mitchell. I heard his voice before I saw him. It was deep, controlled, and sharp. Alexander Pellegrini filled the doorway of his office, a man whose presence made rooms feel small. His dark eyes were fixed on me. He never asked for anything twice. He wanted to review the guest list one more time. I followed him into his office of dark wood and leather. It smelled of power. Below us, the city looked like a kingdom he owned. I confirmed 143 guests would attend. Joseph has assigned 32 men to the grounds, I reported. 8 more are inside. He nodded, pouring a drink even though it was only noon. I could feel his tension. Stay near the main house tomorrow, he commanded. Do not wander off alone. It was not the first time his orders felt more protective than professional. Should I be worried? There is always something to worry about in this life, Gabriella, he said. But you will be safe. Hearing him use my name sent a jolt through me. I told myself it was only fear. He looked at me, truly looked at me, for the first time. There is a dress at your apartment, he said. Wear that. He explained it was appropriate attire for his assistant, but a flicker in his eyes suggested something more. I should have argued. Instead, I simply said, "Thank you." That evening I stared at my reflection. The burgundy silk dress fit perfectly. Alexander noticed everything. A different car, a Mercedes, arrived at 7. The 40-minute drive to the estate was made in complete silence. The Pellegrini home was a monument to old money. Lights burned in every window. Expensive cars lined the drive. Inside, chandeliers glittered over marble floors. I found Alexander immediately. He stood near the grand staircase, surrounded by serious men. He looked dangerous and relaxed all at once. Our eyes met from across the crowded room. He stopped his conversation, his attention locking onto me. He excused himself and began moving through the crowd, straight toward me. "Miss Mitchell," he said, his voice deeper now. "The dress suits you." His gaze made it hard to breathe. I thanked him. He told me I had earned my place here. Joseph Ferraro, his closest man, appeared at his side. "Gabriella, you look beautiful," Joseph said with a friendly smile. Alexander's hand touched the small of my back. The heat burned through the silk. "Stay where I can see you," he murmured, "for my ears alone." Then he was gone. I took some champagne and tried to look like I belonged. The night became a blur of polite talk and careful watching. I saw the extra guards Joseph had placed. I felt the tension hiding beneath the beautiful surface. "You are Alexander's new assistant." An older woman with silver hair and a diamond necklace spoke beside me. I am Maria Santoro. She studied me with sharp eyes. Alexander does not grant trust easily, she said. Her smile was not kind. Be careful, dear. Men like him destroy everything they touch. It is their nature. I suddenly needed air. Joseph appeared as I moved toward the terrace doors. Alexander ordered me to keep you company, he said with a small smile. He led me to the dance floor. He was a graceful dancer, and I followed him easily. You are handling this world better than most, he commented. I admitted that I did not understand this world at all. Alexander keeps secrets. Joseph nodded. That is for your own protection. The less you know, the safer you are. Then his expression changed. I will tell you something he never would. 10 years ago, we were just kids causing trouble on this property. I have never seen him care for someone the way he cares for you, not even for his late wife. Her photo still sits on his desk. He is just my boss, I said. Probably just professional obligation. Joseph laughed, and other dancers looked over. Gabriella, I have been with Alex for 15 years. I know what is professional and what is not. The man watches you so intently. Joseph's thought was cut short. His eyes went wide, looking past my shoulder. Well, this ought to be good. I sensed Alexander before he spoke. The air grew cold as he appeared next to us, his body tight with anger. Joseph, he said. It was not a question, but a command. Joseph's hands fell from my waist. Boss, we were only. I know exactly what you were doing. Alexander's voice was flat, making it more menacing. His dark eyes locked onto mine. Miss Mitchell, come with me. Now. He did not wait for me to agree. He just turned and walked toward the terrace. Joseph gave me a look of apology as I rushed to follow. I could feel everyone's eyes on us. The terrace was empty, lit only by small lights and the glow from the house. Alexander went to the stone railing. He gripped it so hard his knuckles turned white. Mr. Pellegrini, if I did anything wrong. Did you like dancing with Joseph? He faced me, his expression so raw I stepped back. This was not the composed man I worked for. This was someone else. It was only a dance, I said. He was being kind. Kind. He walked toward me, his steps slow and deliberate. Joseph was being kind. And what were you? Thankful for the attention. I do not get why you are so upset. Do you not? He stood just inches from me. I could smell his cologne and see the muscle twitching in his jaw. 8 months, Gabriella. For 8 months you have been in my office, in my life, in my head. 8 months of keeping a professional distance when all I wanted was to. He stopped, his jaw clenched tight. My heart pounded in my chest. Alexander, do you have any idea how many men in that ballroom were watching you? How many of them looked at you in a way they have no right to? They were looking at what is mine. The way he said it should have scared me. Instead, I felt a wave of heat. I am not yours, I whispered, but my voice was weak. He moved even closer. His breath was warm on my skin. Are you not? Then why do you shake when I get close? Why does your heart beat faster when I speak your name? His finger traced my jawline. Why did you look at me as if I was the only one here when you arrived? I had no answer. I could not think. The connection between us was too strong. I cannot stand to see you with another man, he said softly. The words seemed to hurt him. Not with Joseph, not with anyone. It takes all my strength not to show everyone in that room that you belong to me. This is not right, I said, but I leaned toward him. You are my boss. There are lines we cannot cross. Lines? He gave a bitter laugh. I have been holding on to those lines like a lifeline. But seeing you tonight, in that dress I picked for you, watching another man touch you. His hand moved to my waist, pulling me against him. I am finished pretending those lines exist. My mind was screaming at me. This was a terrible idea. This was career suicide. But with his arms around me, his eyes burning with desire, I could not remember why I should care. What does this mean? My voice was just a whisper. It means you are my first thought in the morning and my last thought at night. It means I told myself this was just about being close, about attraction, but it is so much more. You are necessary to me now, and it has nothing to do with work. His thumb drew small circles on my hip. Tell me you do not feel this, and I will let you go. I will go back to being your boss. But you have to tell me the truth, Gabriella. I looked up at this powerful, complicated man. He had become the center of my universe, and I had not even noticed. The safe answer was clear. The smart answer was easy. I feel it, I whispered. Heaven help me, I feel it too. A look of victory crossed his face. Then his mouth came down on mine. It was not a question, but a claim. One hand tangled in my hair, the other held me tightly. I gave in to the kiss completely. 8 months of unspoken feelings erupted at once. When we pulled apart, we were both out of breath. Alexander rested his forehead on mine. This changes everything, he said. I know. There are parts of my life you do not understand. Things that could be dangerous for you, just because you know me. I looked him in the eye. Then make me understand. No more secrets. If this is real, I need the truth. He looked at me for a long moment, then he nodded. Come to my office tomorrow. I will explain everything you need to know. But tonight, he gently touched my lip with his thumb. Tonight, I just want this. He kissed me again, this time more slowly. It was deep and possessive. By the time we went back inside, I understood that nothing would be the same. I had crossed a boundary with my dangerous boss. There was no turning back. I knew there was no going back to simple professional rules. I could not sleep that night. Every time my eyes closed, I could feel Alexander's touch and taste his kiss. I heard the hunger in his voice when he claimed me. I spent the night telling myself it was a mistake, then deciding I did not care. Monday morning came too soon. I put on my usual work clothes, gray pants, and a silk shirt. I braced myself for whichever Alexander I would find. The one who kissed me on the terrace, or the guarded businessman. The office felt strange when I walked in at 8. The reception area was the same, the view was the same, but the air felt heavy with risk and excitement. I put my things down and turned on my computer, trying to focus on my normal routine. Alexander's door was shut. His schedule said he arrived an hour early. He was either hiding from me or handling something private. Maybe both. At 9:15, his door opened. He wore a dark blue suit like a piece of armor. His face was a mask. Our eyes met for a second before he looked away. Good morning, Miss Mitchell. Please make sure the conference room is ready for the 10 o'clock meeting. Check that the food has been delivered. Miss Mitchell. Not Gabriella. The formal name was a sharp sting. Of course, Mr. Pellegrini. It is all taken care of. He gave a single nod and went back into his office. The soft click of the door felt like a wall going up. I stared at the wood, feeling torn between being hurt and trying to understand. He promised me the truth today. Maybe this coldness was just how he kept control until we could talk. The morning passed so slowly. The meeting with the investors from Japan was fine. My translation work was needed, but my presence was not. I recorded notes from a corner, intensely aware of Alexander at the table's head. He controlled the room, moving between English and Japanese with an uneducated intelligence. But I saw the signs, the way he shifted when I spoke, the way his fingers tapped when someone praised my work. He would almost look at me, then force his eyes back to the numbers. When the investors left, he refused to meet my gaze. Thank you, Miss Mitchell. That is all. The dismissal was cold. I sat at my desk, lost. At 2:30, Joseph arrived with coffee from the cafe Alexander liked. He placed a cup before me. A peace offering, he said with a small smile. For last night. You did nothing wrong. I am an adult who chose to dance. Yes, but I knew what would happen. He sat in a chair across from me. Alex rarely loses control. His jealousy was a lesson. I held the warm cup. He has barely looked at me. He is not regretting it, Joseph said. He is terrified of it. He glanced at Alexander's closed door and spoke quietly. You need to know something. 6 months ago, a rival group appeared. Albanians, led by Viktor Kranicki. They want the port. 3 people are already dead. My stomach tightened. Who were they? Associates. One was a cousin of the Santoro boy. These men have no rules. He paused. 2 months ago, they began taking pictures of people close to us, family, anyone who could be used as leverage. The truth hit me like a wave of ice. That is why he mentioned security. That is why he has had men watching you since September, discreetly, to make sure Victor's crew did not notice you. Joseph's eyes were kind. Alex tried to keep you at a distance to protect you. Last night, seeing you with me, his control broke. Why did no one tell me? Because you would be scared and angry. You would question this job. He leaned in. But you must understand Alexander. His wife, Sophia, died 4 years ago. It was called an accident. He has never believed that. He thinks it was revenge for a bad deal. The guilt follows him every day. He loved her. He did. And when she died, a part of him died too. He was just existing. Until you arrived 8 months ago with your skills and your stubbornness. Joseph almost smiled. He started to live again. That terrifies him. Caring for you makes you a target. The pieces of the puzzle fell into place. His overprotective nature, his reaction to me and Joseph, the conflict in his voice. So what do I do now? That is your choice. But this world is not safe, Gabriella. People get hurt when they become a weakness. He stood up. Alex promised you honesty. When he gives it, you must decide if you can love a man like him. I stared at my screen, but I saw nothing. My mind raced. The unknown security, the hidden threats, the weight of Alexander's grief. The afternoon was a blur of mindless work. At 5:30, the office emptied. I stayed, waiting for the conversation he promised. At 6:15, his door opened. He looked exhausted, his tie loose. You are still here. You promised me honesty. I am waiting. Respect showed in his eyes. Come in. His office was dark except for a desk lamp. He poured 2 glasses of whiskey and led me to a sofa. Joseph spoke with you, he said. It was a statement. He gave me context, about the threats, about the protection. I drank the whiskey, feeling its burn. Why did you not tell me? Because ignorance is a shield. If they thought you were just an assistant, you were safer. He paused, his grip tightening on his glass. Safer than if they knew. Knew what? His dark eyes were full of a painful truth. Knew that you are the most important person in my life, that I would destroy this city to keep you safe, that losing you would break me in a way losing Sophia never did. With her, I loved the woman I was supposed to. With you, I chose to love. The words took my breath. Gabriella, being with me means constant security. It means questioning everyone. It means my enemies will see you as my weakness. It is a danger you do not deserve. His voice grew quiet. But I am selfish. I hope you stay. I thought about leaving. About a normal life without armed guards and turf wars that leave bodies behind. Then I looked at Alexander. I saw the lonely man beneath the power. I saw the desperate hope for something good in his dark world. I am not going anywhere, I said. But you cannot protect me by pushing me away. We do this together. No more secrets. Relief washed over him. That is not my instinct. Then you must learn a new one. He pulled me to his side. We sat in the quiet dark as the city lights appeared below us. I need to take you somewhere, he said. Somewhere private. Will you have dinner with me? Is this a date? A small smile touched his lips. Does it matter? I guess not. The restaurant was hidden in Little Italy. The host knew Alexander by name and gave us a private room. Red wine and warm bread appeared without us asking. We talked for hours. He told me about his father training him for this life, how he tried to leave it behind after marrying Sophia, how her death pulled him back into the darkness. I told him about my parents. They died in a plane crash 3 years ago, leaving me alone. I explained how I found this job purely by chance. I never dreamed where that thought would take me. Our car stopped outside my building in Queens just before midnight. The driver, Marco, moved to open my door, but Alexander stopped him. "Wait here, I will just be 5 minutes." He walked with me to the building entrance, his hand resting on my back. At my door, I turned around, unsure of what to do now. How do you say good night to your boss when he is so much more? Thank you for dinner, and for being honest. Thank you for not running away when you should have. He held my face between his hands. I will see you tomorrow. Every day, I promised. He kissed me then. It was softer than the kiss on the terrace, but just as deep. When he pulled away, he touched his forehead to mine. "This is not safe for either of us," he whispered. "But I do not think I care anymore." "Good," I said. "I stopped caring about the danger when you told me you felt the same way." I watched him drive away. My lips were still tingling. I felt a strange sense of hope, even with all the warnings. Tomorrow would be a new kind of challenge. I chose Alexander Pellegrini, and that choice changed everything. For 2 weeks, my life followed a new rhythm. My job was the same on the surface. I arrived at 8, managed his impossible schedule, and handled calls from powerful people. But underneath, Alexander no longer saw me as just an assistant. He started asking for my opinion during strategy meetings. He listened when I saw problems or other solutions. After a call with the Santoro family, he wanted to know what I observed about their tactics. He told me I had good instincts. As we reviewed projections, his hand rested on my shoulder. He said I could read people, a valuable skill in his world. I told him I just paid attention, completely aware of his touch. He leaned in close, his breath warm. He said most people only see what they want to see, but I truly observe. It was one of many things he found fascinating about me. These moments became common. We shared stolen touches and long dinners where he was treated like a king. Our talks moved from business to our own lives. He spoke of his mother, the moral compass his father never had. I told him my last words to my own mother were impatient ones, spoken right before her plane crashed. Alexander took my hand and said guilt was a useless poison. I pointed out that he blamed himself for his wife's death. His jaw grew tight. He insisted that was different. He said his choices led to her death. He knew enough. Then he called for the check, ending the conversation. Some wounds were still too raw. On a Wednesday, an email made my stomach clench. A donation of $50,000 was made to my mother's hospital for cancer research. It was in her name. The donor was anonymous, but I knew. Only one person could have known those specific details. I walked into Alexander's office without knocking, holding the printed email. I told him he donated to my mother's hospital. My voice was thick with emotion. He took off his reading glasses. He said my mother deserved better care, and this might help other families. I told him it was an incredible amount of money. He stood and walked toward me, saying money was just a tool. Using it to honor someone important to me was not generosity, it was just basic decency. He wiped a tear from my cheek. He told me that if no one had ever done something like this for me, then I had been failed. He pulled me close, promising he had no intention of stopping. The next day, he showed up with plane tickets. We were going to Boston for meetings and would return Sunday. I asked if we would have separate hotel rooms. A dark fire lit his eyes. He said we would be on separate floors. He did not trust himself with me just down the hall. He confessed he would be at my door at 2 in the morning because he could not sleep knowing I was so close. The honesty of his words warmed me. We had kissed, but he always kept a firm boundary. He said I needed to understand what choosing him truly meant before we crossed that line. The Boston hotel was modern and expensive. True to his word, he was on the 20th floor and I was on the 15th. Friday's meetings were long and draining. By dinner, I was exhausted. Alexander told me to get some rest. The next day would be lighter. After a breakfast meeting, the afternoon was mine. He said he always worked, but could be convinced to explore the city with me. I said I would like that. The elevator stopped at my floor, and he walked me to my room. He caged me against the doorframe, his body close but not touching. His voice was rough when he spoke. He said he wanted to come inside and forget about rational decisions. He wanted me in a way that had nothing to do with patience. My breath caught in my throat. I asked what was stopping him. He said I deserved better than a hotel room. He knew that once he had me, he would never let me go. His forehead touched mine. He said his world was about to become much more dangerous, and I needed to see that reality first. I asked him how. He simply told me to get some sleep and meet him on the rooftop at 6 in the morning. He kissed me deeply, then he was gone. I barely slept. I dressed and went to the rooftop just before dawn. Alexander was already there with 2 cups of coffee, watching the sky begin to lighten. He told me he rarely sleeps well. He gestured to the rising sun, saying it was proof the world keeps turning. We watched the dawn break over the city. Then he started to speak. He said his wife, Sophia, died on a cold, rainy night just like this one. She was driving home from a charity event he had skipped for work. Her car went off a bridge. The official report called it an accident, but the details never made sense. Her brake lines looked like they were tampered with. A witness saw another car following her. He looked right at me. He said he knew someone killed her. He just could never prove who gave the order. That, he said, was the reality of his world. People died for sending a message or for old grudges. Those closest to power were always the biggest targets. I put down my coffee and took his hand. I asked him to tell me about who Sophia was, not how she died. A flicker of surprise crossed his face. He said she was genuinely good and saw the best in everyone. She believed he could build a legitimate life, free from violence. I asked if he loved her. He said yes, with respect and deep affection. When she died, the guilt almost destroyed him because he had brought her into his world and failed to protect her. The sun was now fully up. I asked if that was why he kept his distance from me. He said he was trying to, but he had failed. He held my face in his hands. You are not Sophia. You do not see me as someone who can be saved by love. You see me for who I am. You see the darkness and the violence, and you are still standing here. That thought both terrifies and amazes me. I am not going anywhere, Alexander. We will face whatever is coming together. He kissed me then, a soft and careful touch, like I was something precious he might break. When we pulled apart, the city below was awake. The flight home that Sunday was quiet. I had tried to call my best friend Amanda twice, but I hung up both times. I suddenly understood the danger she would be in just by knowing me. Choosing Alexander meant choosing to be alone. Monday morning made that choice very clear. A cream-colored envelope with no return address was waiting on my desk. My name was written on the front. The script was elegant but looked threatening. My instinct screamed that this would change everything. Inside, there were photographs. Me leaving my apartment. Me going into Alexander's office building. Me at the restaurant in Boston. And the worst one, me and Alexander on the hotel roof. His hands were on my face, the kiss captured perfectly. Under the pictures was a note in a language I could not read. But the message was obvious even without a translation. We are watching. We know what you are to him. My hands were shaking as I walked into Alexander's office. He was on the phone but ended the call when he saw my face. What is wrong? I put the envelope on his desk. He opened it, his face growing cold as he looked at each picture. When he read the note, a muscle in his jaw tightened. Albanian, he said. From Victor's crew. It says they will send instructions soon. Instructions for what? His dark eyes met mine. For the first time, I saw real fear in them, for whatever they believe will hurt me the most: kidnapping, extortion, or worse. The danger was suddenly very real. This was not a distant threat. These people had followed me and photographed me. They were planning what to do next. The security Joseph mentioned, I said. My voice was more steady than I felt. How long have they really been watching me? Since early September. We saw them watching key associates. I had Joseph protect you immediately. I did not tell you because I wanted to keep you safe and unaware. If you knew, you would have acted differently. They would have seen you were important. He came around his desk and pulled me against him. This is my fault. I should have kept my distance. I should have kept you away from this. I pulled back to look at him. Do not feel guilty. I need you to tell me everything. Stop trying to protect me by keeping me ignorant. Who is Viktor Krasnicki, and what does he want? Alexander looked at my face, judging if I could handle the truth. He must have decided I could, because he nodded. Sit down. This will take some time. He then explained everything in brutal detail. Viktor Krasnicki was the leader of an Albanian mafia group. They had been trying to take over New York territory for 2 years. They wanted the port operations that 5 Italian families, including the Pellinis, had controlled for 3 generations. 3 people were already dead in the fighting. One was a cousin of the Santoro family. His throat was cut as a message. The Albanians did not follow the old rules of conduct. They went after civilians, used terrible violence, and had no respect for tradition. Victor himself was known for being cruel. He enjoyed making examples of people who crossed him. Why have the families not united to stop him? I asked. They are trying. But Victor has connections in Eastern Europe. He has resources we cannot easily fight. Also, the families cannot agree on what to do. Some want to negotiate. Others want to go to war. Victor wants this uncertainty. It keeps us reacting instead of planning. I thought about what he said. So by targeting me, he is trying to disrupt your judgment. Exactly. If I am worried about you, I am not focused on the real fight. And if he can capture you, he can force me to make deals that would weaken our whole alliance. Hearing him talk about my kidnapping so calmly should have made me run. Instead, I felt calm. I would be afraid later. Right now, I needed to know more. What are my options? Alexander seemed surprised. I asked. I can arrange for you to leave New York. You would get a new identity and money. You would be safe, but you would have to disappear forever. And the other option is you accept my protection. Real protection, not the secret surveillance. It means moving to a safe place with armed guards at all times. Your movements will be restricted until we stop the threat. I thought about running, about that new life far away from all this. My love for Alexander had trapped me. I could not save myself by leaving him to face this danger alone. I want your protection, I said, my voice steady. But I have conditions. His eyebrows lifted. You are negotiating? I told him to trust my instincts. I would not be hidden away like a doll. If I was joining his world, I would do it with my eyes open. He watched me for a long time before pride softened his face. Agreed. But security is not a negotiation. You will listen to my men. You must be safe. I had fully committed to his dangerous world. There was no returning to my old life. I had chosen him, and now I would face the consequences. The penthouse was a converted warehouse with brick walls and huge windows that viewed the river. Alexander's team had secured it completely. The bedroom is there, he said. Your clothes have arrived. I asked him where he would sleep. He told me the study had a pull-out couch. This is your home. I will not take your bed. His jaw grew tight. We will not share one, Gabriella. Not while you are only here for safety. He was arguing with himself, so I let it go. The first days were tense. We moved around each other carefully. He worked late, and I worked from the penthouse, guarded by 2 men named Carlo and Vincent. Soon, the awkwardness became a routine. Alexander came home earlier. We started eating dinner together, sharing stories about our lives. My father wanted me to be a lawyer, he said one night. He thought it would be useful. I only lasted one semester before he needed me for other work. I asked him, "Do you regret it?" He thought about my question. "I regret having no choice. My life was decided for me." He continued, "The business, the violence, it was all my inheritance." I told him he was a good leader. "Being good at something does not make it your purpose," he answered, taking my hand. He wondered what he would be in a different, normal life. "You would be bored in a week," I teased. He laughed. "Probably, but maybe I would have met you." I told him I would not want a simple life if it meant not knowing all of him, even the dark parts. Our bond deepened. He read philosophy. I started painting again. He had supplies for me, turning a third bedroom into my studio. But beneath our calm routine, Alexander was hunting for a traitor. I saw it during his calls. He asked casual questions about money and operations, his eyes sharp, searching for lies. 3 weeks later, I joined a virtual meeting. Paolo Ricci, the chief accountant of 12 years, gave the report. But something was wrong. His hands were shaking. He avoided looking at the camera when Alexander questioned him. He stumbled over simple explanations. After the call, I went to Alexander. "Paolo seemed nervous," I said. Alexander's eyes focused. "You saw it too." He listed Paolo's mistakes. The man avoided eye contact and fumbled numbers he should have known by heart. I remembered something else. He mentioned a $15,000 payment to a contractor I never approved. Alexander leaned back. "I have been watching Paolo for 10 days. I saw small errors in his reports." He suspected Paolo was the source of their problems. "He is being pressured," Alexander explained. "His daughter is in her 20s and has large gambling debts. Victor's people use weaknesses like that." My mind shifted to strategy. "If he is being blackmailed, maybe you can convince him to help you." Alexander agreed, but needed proof. A wrong move could reveal their entire plan. I walked behind his chair and placed my hands on his tense shoulders. "You will figure it out," I whispered. He covered my hand with his. "Having you here and safe helps me think clearly." That night, I decided to cook. The kitchen was beautiful and professional. I made a simple pasta sauce, humming a song my mother taught me. Suddenly, I felt him watching. I turned and saw Alexander standing silently in the doorway. His face was impossible to read. "I did not hear you," I said. "You were singing," he replied, his voice strained. "It is an old Italian folk song from my mother." I instantly knew what was wrong. "I am sorry." "Do not be," he said, stepping slowly into the room. "Sophia used to sing that." He explained she had learned it to feel closer to his family. "You sing it like you have known it forever." His hand came up to my face, his thumb gently tracing my lip. "I want to kiss you more than anything," I whispered. "Then kiss me." "I cannot." "Not like this," he said, pressing his forehead to mine. "You are here because of me, because of danger. It would not be real. Closeness." "That is not true. I chose to be with you before I knew any of this. But was it a free choice, or were you already in too deep to see another way?" He pulled back a little, his hands on my face. "I need you to choose clearly, Gabriella. It cannot be a choice made from fear or gratitude. When we are finally together, I have to know it is because you want me, not because you were pushed into my arms." His honor was both frustrating and touching. "You are overthinking this." "Maybe. But I have already taken so much from you. Your safety, your normal life. I will not also take your choice." He kissed my forehead gently. "When this is over, when Victor is gone, you can leave if you want to. If you still want me then, ask me again. Nothing will stop me from making you mine." He stepped back. The few feet between us felt like miles. "Dinner smells wonderful. I will set the table." I watched him move around the kitchen, getting plates and silverware. I understood something important about Alexander Pellegrini. He had great power and control. His world was full of violence, but he had a core of honor that would not break, even if it cost him something he wanted badly. That night, I slept alone in his bedroom while he took the study. I made up my mind. When the danger was gone, I would choose him again. I would choose him clearly, with no doubts, and then we would be together. The next morning, Joseph came for a breakfast meeting. Alexander had been vague about why. I sat with them at the dining table. I would no longer be left out of talks about my own safety. The situation got worse last night, Joseph said. The Albanians took Tommy Benedetti. He is 16 years old, the nephew of Carlo Benedetti of the Brooklyn family. They want territory in exchange for his return. My stomach felt cold. Will they really free him if the family agrees? Probably not. This is what Victor does. He makes demands, gets what he wants, and then kills the hostage anyway to show his power. Joseph looked serious. Carlo's family cannot handle this. They are small. They do not have the resources to fight the Albanians. Alexander's jaw was tight with anger. That is exactly why Victor chose them. It forces us to either help them and use our resources, or abandon them and break our alliance. What will you do? I asked. We will help, but we will be smart about it. Victor wants us to be emotional. I need to be strategic. He looked at Joseph. Increase surveillance on all known Albanian spots. I want to know where Victor is, who he meets, every single move he makes. And focus on Paolo. If he is our leak, he might know where they are keeping the boy. We are on it. We have been tracking his calls for a week. His main phone is clean. But he has a second phone he thinks we do not know about. We are intercepting it now. After Joseph was gone, I helped Alexander with the dishes. You are going to save that boy if Tommy Benedetti was already dead. Victor did not keep prisoners. The brutal truth did not shock me. It was the reality of this world. He pulled me close. I promise this ends soon, Gabriella. You will live without fear again. In his arms, I accepted all of him, the protector and the predator, the man of tenderness and the man of violence. I chose him. Just then, Paolo Ricci arrived at the penthouse, flanked by two guards. The accountant's face was slick with sweat. He knew exactly why he was there. Alexander pointed to a chair. Sit down, Paolo. I watched from the window, pretending to work. This was the moment we had been building toward. Mr. Pellegrini, I can explain. Then explain. Alexander's voice was ice. Explain the secret phone, the fake companies. Explain why you have been leaking information to Victor Kresnicki for 3 months. Paolo broke. They have my daughter. She owes them $200,000 in gambling debts. They threatened her. Why did you not come to me? I was ashamed. I never gave them anything critical. Alexander's face was impossible to read. He asked Paolo if he knew the price of treason. Paolo's hands were shaking. He said he was ready for any punishment, but begged for his daughter's life. After a long silence, Alexander offered a choice. Paolo could die, or he could become a double agent. Alexander would pay the $200,000 his daughter owed. In exchange, Paolo would feed false information to Victor. This was not mercy. Alexander explained that Paolo acted from desperation, not greed, which made him a controllable asset once the source of that desperation was gone. But the warning was clear. If Paolo betrayed him a second time, his daughter would die a slow death, followed by his own. After Paolo was escorted to Joseph to begin the arrangement, I remarked that the decision was merciful. Alexander corrected me. It was strategic. He explained that Victor once got drunk and bragged about how he seized power. He had murdered his own uncle with poison 3 years earlier. In their culture, killing family for power was an unforgivable crime. If the Council of Elders in Tana discovered this, Victor would be finished. His own people would carry out the death sentence. This was the leverage Alexander needed. Paolo even remembered the name of the man who administered the poison. More importantly, He knew Victor kept documents as insurance, including a recorded confession. Alexander assigned a team to find this proof. With it, they could win the war without a single shot. 2 days later, Alexander told me we were going to an emergency summit in Atlantic City. The 5 major families needed to show unity after Carlo Benedetti's nephew was found dead in the harbor. I insisted on going with him. He started to object, but I argued that leaving me behind showed weakness. Bringing me showed confidence. A slow smile formed on his face. I told him he needed my instincts about people. He finally agreed, telling me to pack for an overnight trip. Atlantic City in November was cold and empty. The hotel was pure luxury, all marble and gold. He had booked us rooms on separate floors. But when I came out of my room dressed for dinner, I found him waiting in the hallway. He said I looked stunning, his eyes lingering on me. I took his offered arm. The private dining room held a long table with 12 seats for the 5 family heads and their seconds. I recognized them all. Teresa Vital, the only woman in charge of a family, immediately challenged my presence. Alexander calmly stated that I was his most trusted advisor. Salvatore Santoro sneered, commenting that I was young enough to be his daughter and pretty enough to be a distraction. I felt Alexander grow tense, but I spoke first. I stated my age was 28 and that I coordinated most of their business with him. I asked if he would rather I left so he could continue judging women on their looks instead of their ability. The room went quiet. Then Teresa Vital let out a sharp laugh and said she liked me. I could stay. The dinner quickly became an argument. Salvatore wanted war. Antonio wanted to attack their finances. Marco wanted to negotiate. The debate turned personal, especially between Antonio and Marco. They were focused on old grudges, which was exactly what Victor wanted. I quieted the room by offering a historical lesson. I spoke of the Sicilian Vespers in 1282, when feuding factions united against a common foreign enemy. They succeeded because they put aside their internal fights to deal with the immediate threat. I told them Victor was their foreign threat. He did not respect their rules or traditions. He will destroy you one by one while you fight over nothing. Marco admitted I was right. Teresa added that I had a name. She agreed we had to handle Victor first, then we could resume our arguments. That broke the tension. Soon they were planning a real strategy. An alliance was formed before the night ended. Under the table, Alexander squeezed my hand. Later, as he walked me to my room, he called my actions remarkable. You saved a meeting that was about to fall apart. I told him it was simple logic. He disagreed, saying I understood the men in that room perfectly. Outside my door, he told me I was perfect. He admitted he could no longer keep his distance. After seeing my strength, all he wanted was me. My heart stopped. I told him to take me. He warned me there was no turning back. I answered by pulling him into a deep kiss. It was filled with 9 months of unspoken feelings. We only stopped so I could open the door. The moment the door shut, he pinned me against it. His mouth found mine. I love you, he confessed between kisses. He said he had fought it for months, but could not pretend any longer. I love you too, I told him. He said I brought light back into his life and gave him a reason to live. We knew we would face all future dangers together. In that room, we finally let ourselves be what we were meant to be. We were no longer just employer and employee. We were in love. After Atlantic City, our New York penthouse felt like a true home. The morning after we got back, I woke up in his arms. He was watching me. I felt wonderful until I sat up. A sudden wave of dizziness hit me hard. Alexander was immediately worried. I told him I just moved too quickly, but he watched me with concerned eyes. At breakfast, we looked at new intelligence from Joseph. Paulo was successfully misleading Victor's men. I asked how long it would last. Alexander estimated 2 weeks at most. That gave us a short time to find the documents we needed. Over the next week, I focused on my work. The Alliance was sharing information, helping us track Victor. But a deep exhaustion settled over me. I felt tired and breathless all the time, which made no sense. I told myself it was just stress. But one afternoon, I stood up and nearly collapsed. The world went sideways. Alexander found me pale and shaking. His voice was firm. "We are going to the hospital now." He refused to listen to my excuses and called Joseph for a car. He assured me Dr. Castellano was a trusted family friend who would be discreet. Soon, I was in an exam room that felt more like a hotel than a clinic. Alexander held my hand during the first part of the exam. Then his phone buzzed with an urgent message about Victor. I told him to go, assuring him I would be fine. He was reluctant, but left to take the call after a worried kiss. Dr. Castellano performed several tests, from blood work to a neurological check. He said everything seemed normal, but my blood pressure was a little high. He concluded it was probably stress. He wanted a full analysis of my blood work for the next day. He warned me that stress was hurting my health. I felt foolish for causing so much worry. Joseph and Vincent met me in the hall and led me to the car. We were driving for only a few minutes when Vincent spoke. "We are being followed. A black car has been behind us since the clinic." My blood ran cold as Joseph started making a call. Vincent saw at least 2 men in the car behind us. He made a series of turns to confirm they were being followed. The sedan matched every move. Joseph ended a call and told me calmly that backup was on the way. He said to get down and stay low. This was an attempt to abduct me. He drew his weapon as Vincent sped up, weaving through traffic. A second car appeared from a side street, trying to block us. Vincent wrenched the wheel, jumping the curb and bouncing hard over the sidewalk. Just as we got back on the road, the rear window exploded from a gunshot. I screamed as Joseph shot back through the broken glass. Each shot felt like a punch. "Back up?" Vincent yelled over the noise. 2 minutes out. Joseph reloaded smoothly as Vincent sped through the streets. A tire exploded. The car swerved wildly. Then 3 of our own SUVs appeared, trapping our attackers. The shooting stopped instantly. Vincent pulled into an alley. The damaged vehicle hissed steam. "Are you hurt?" Joseph asked, his voice full of concern. I checked myself. I was bruised but not broken. "I am okay. Just scared." "You did well," Joseph said. "Time to move." In seconds, they moved me to a new SUV inside a protective circle of guards. As our convoy sped away, my phone rang. Alexander's voice was rough with fear. "Are you hurt?" "I am fine. Joseph and Vincent saved me." He let out a shaky breath. "The penthouse is locked down. I will be there in 10 minutes. "Alexander, this is real now." "I know," he said, "and I will end this tonight. Victor just made his last mistake." I trembled on the sofa, replaying the attack in my mind. The shattered glass. The thought of what Victor would have done to me. When Alexander burst in, he looked wild. His hair was a mess, his tie gone. He crossed the room and pulled me into a crushing hug. "I almost lost you," he choked out. "But you did not. Your security worked." He held my face, his dark eyes searching mine. "This ends tonight. I cannot live with this fear. Victor dies or I do, but this war is over. Do not say that." "Then understand," he whispered. "I will do brutal things to keep you safe." I pulled him down to kiss him. "I am not going anywhere," I told him. "I choose you, Alexander. With all the danger. Do what you need to do. End this war and come back to me." Relief washed over his face. He held me close, then stood up, his phone already in his hand. "Joseph, conference room, 20 minutes. Get everyone on video." As he began making calls, I knew I had just given him my blessing to do whatever darkness was required. The final plan came together within 2 days. He transformed into a general preparing for war. Paolo was the key. He carefully leaked a story that Alexander was broken and ready to negotiate. The meeting was set for a neutral warehouse. "Victor's ego will bring him," Alexander stated. "He needs to see me surrender." He explained that Victor would bring a dozen men, but we would have 30 waiting. This ends either way. That night, Alexander insisted I stay at a separate, secure building. He was walking into danger, and I had to watch from a cold, dark room. True power is supposed to protect, but all I felt was helpless. Alexander placed a small device in my ear. "You will hear everything," he said. "But if you hear gunfire, Joseph gets you out immediately. No arguments." He held my face, his gaze intense. "I have never had someone like you to come home to. That changes everything." His kiss was a promise to return. "Come back to me," I whispered. Then he was gone, and I was alone with Joseph and a wall of monitors. Headlights sliced through the darkness. 3 black SUVs rolled to a stop. Viktor Krasnicki stepped out. Photographs did not do him justice. He was shorter than Alexander and thick with muscle that looked earned, not sculpted. A scar cut through his eyebrow. 8 men surrounded him, their eyes constantly moving. Our own teams were hidden in the shadows, an unseen army. Alexander stood by a single table in the center of the vast space. He looked relaxed, but I knew better. Victor's cold smile filled the screen. His voice, thick with an accent, came through my earpiece. "Pellegrini, you look tired." Alexander's voice was steady, giving nothing away. "Let us skip the posturing, Kresnicki. You wanted to negotiate." They sat like kings deciding the fate of a nation. Victor's terms were simple. He wanted control of the ports, 20% of all shipping, and me. My blood turned to ice. "The girl is not part of any negotiation," Alexander said, his voice dangerously low. Victor's smile widened. "She is now." "You are not getting her," Alexander repeated. "Propose different terms." Victor leaned back, enjoying himself. "No, those are the terms." For a long moment, there was only silence. Then Alexander reached slowly into his jacket. Victor's men raised their weapons. Alexander ignored them, pulling out a slim folder. He slid it across the table. "Before we continue, there is something you should see." Victor's man opened it. Even on the grainy monitor, I saw his face turn pale. "Where did you get these?" Victor's voice cracked. Alexander was calm. "I have records. Proof you poisoned your uncle Anton 3 years ago to take his power." "This is fabrication!" Victor screamed, jumping to his feet. "The Council of Elders in Toronto will not think so," Alexander said, his voice cutting through the rage. "I have already sent them copies. Killing family is the ultimate betrayal in your culture. You know the punishment for that, do you not? You are bluffing." Alexander laid out the options. Permanent exile with enough money to live, or he would release the evidence and let Victor's own people hunt him down. The choice was clear. Victor's hand moved toward his weapon. It all happened in a blur. One of his men drew a gun, aiming for Alexander. 2 shots echoed as Vincent fired first. The man dropped. A long, tense silence followed. Victor slowly raised his empty hands. "Smart choice," Alexander said. The remaining men looked at their leader, their loyalty broken. The man they followed had violated their most sacred code. "You expect me to just walk away?" Victor asked, his voice shaking. "I expect you to be intelligent," Alexander answered. "Your own people will deliver justice if you stay." He accepted exile. In the surveillance room, I finally let out a breath. It was over. Alexander had won with strategy, not bloodshed. "Well played," Joseph said beside me. But my relief vanished. The main video feed flickered and died. The audio cut to static. My heart hammered against my ribs. "What is happening?" I demanded. Joseph was already trying to fix it. "Interference. Someone is jamming the signal." The silence was terrifying. My mind filled with the worst possibilities. The seconds stretched into an eternity. After 5 minutes, the screen suddenly came back to life. Alexander was standing exactly where he had been, completely unharmed. Victor was being led away by armed guards. Relief washed over me, so intense it almost brought me to my knees. 20 minutes later, Alexander walked through the door. I did not wait for him to speak. I launched myself at him, wrapping my arms and legs around him. He held me tightly. I could not hear you, I whispered against his neck. The feed cut out, and I thought you were gone. I am here. It is over. He held me so tight I could not breathe. His heart pounded against me. Victor is on his way to house arrest. His organization is finished. The council will make sure he never returns. We are safe. He finally set me down. You are safe. We are both safe. Joseph cleared his throat and left us alone. Alexander pulled me onto his lap, keeping me close. I heard him, I said quietly. I heard him talk about me like property. That was never going to happen, he said. I would have burned the city down first. I know, but hearing it made your world feel real. He pulled me closer, his voice low. You are my whole world. He said every risk he took was for me, to give me a life without fear. The power and respect meant nothing. Coming home to me, knowing I was safe, was everything. I looked him in the eye and asked what came next. We go home, he said. We will build the life we want, not the one we were given. Then he kissed me, with a deep sense of relief. We had survived. In his arms, I accepted all of Alexander Pellegrini. He was a man of darkness and light, of violence and care. Our love was not a fairy tale. It was real, built on a foundation others would never understand. But it was ours. The next 3 months passed in a whirlwind of change. Victor was flown to Sao Paulo under guard. His entire network collapsed within days. The other families moved in quickly and cleaned up the mess. Alexander's peace deals were honored in writing. The war was officially over. My own life changed just as fast. At a meeting 2 weeks later, Alexander pointed me to the seat next to his. He told the assembled leaders that my strategic thinking helped them win. He promoted me from assistant to strategic consultant. Salvatore Santoro, a man who once questioned me, nodded his approval. Teresa Vital simply smiled. She said it was about time he made my role official. And just like that, I became an advisor. The title was real. Alexander wanted my opinions on deals and people. I had earned my place in his world through my own skills. We were living in his penthouse, but one day he drove me to a different part of the city. He stopped in front of a classic brownstone on a quiet street. He asked what I thought of it. He said it could be ours. It was not a fortress. It was a real home. He was offering me a normal life. I said I wanted it. We moved in 2 weeks later. Joseph managed the move and joked that he was my professional mover now. The new house had a warmth the penthouse lacked. There were exposed brick walls and tall windows that filled the rooms with light. The kitchen was made for cooking real meals. Alexander turned one of the bedrooms into an art studio for me. He had remembered I used to paint. When I saw the waiting canvases and easels, I started to cry. Our life together became quiet and domestic. We had coffee in the mornings and read together at night. We built a routine that felt normal and safe. Joseph became more than a bodyguard. He was a true friend who joined us for Sunday dinners. Watching him with Alexander, I saw they were like brothers. Their bond was built on a lifetime of trust. One night, Joseph told me I was good for his friend. He had never seen Alexander so happy or relaxed. He said I made him laugh again. That March, I finally found the courage to call my friend Amanda. Her voice was full of suspicion when she answered. She asked if my disappearance had something to do with my boss. I took a deep breath and told her the truth. I said Alexander and I were together. I tried to explain that his life was complicated, but that I was safe and very happy. She immediately asked if I was in some kind of trouble. I assured her this was my choice. This life was not what I planned, but it was real, and I loved him. Amanda was silent for a long time. She finally said that if I was truly happy, she would support me. But she had to see me with her own eyes. We met for lunch a week later. She looked at me, and her worry disappeared. She took my hand and said she could see it was real. I also found a new purpose in my work. Alexander's organization ran several educational charities that were poorly managed. I took them over and started building real scholarship programs for students who needed them. Alexander watched me work. He said I was turning dirty money into something good. He was surprised I could handle the moral conflict. I told him the money existed no matter what. Those students cared about opportunity, not where the funding came from. I could not change his world, but I could create some good from within it. He pulled me close, looking proud. He said I had changed everything for him. You have more power. You are showing me there is another way. Are you actually thinking about going legitimate? Not all at once, but shifting your focus. The shipping operations could be completely legal. So could the real estate, the restaurants, and the import businesses. It would take years, maybe decades, but the Pellegrini name could mean something good. The hope in his voice was overwhelming. You do that for me, and I do it for us. For the future we are building. For the children we might have one day. He kissed me. You have given me a reason to want that future, Gabriella. On a warm evening in early May, Alexander came home looking nervous. I had never seen him like that. He insisted on cooking, which meant he ordered food from our favorite Italian place and pretended he made it. After dinner, he led me to the living room. He had lit candles and arranged white roses everywhere, a delicate scent. What is all this? I asked. My heart started to race. Gabriella Mitchell. He took both of my hands. His dark eyes stared into mine. 10 months ago, you walked into my life and you changed everything. You brought light to a darkness I had lived in for years. You showed me that power without purpose is empty. He let go of one hand to get a small box from his pocket. My breath caught in my throat. You have seen the worst parts of me. You have seen the violence and the darkness that comes with my world. And you chose to stay. Not because you were trapped, but because you saw something in me worth loving. He opened the box. It held an antique ring with a large center diamond. This belonged to my grandmother. She wore it for 60 years of marriage to a difficult man in a dangerous world. She was the strongest woman I knew, until I met you. Tears were streaming down my face. He took the ring from the box and held it. Marry me, Gabriella. Build this life with me, knowing everything it involves. Give me the honor of being your husband. Yes. The word was choked with emotion. Yes, absolutely. Yes. He slid the ring onto my finger. It fit perfectly. He pulled me into his arms, holding me so tight I could feel his heart racing. I love you, he whispered into my hair. More than I thought was possible. You are my whole world. I love you too. All of you. Even the complicated parts. We stood there for a long time, holding each other. Finally, Alexander pulled away. Dance with me. There is no music. We will make our own. He pulled me close, and we swayed to the sound of our heartbeats. Just two people who found each other against all odds. We were building something real. I thought about the first night at the party. I remembered how Alexander had exploded with jealousy when I danced with Joseph. We had traveled so far from that moment of angry possession to this moment of secure love. The journey had been violent and terrifying, but it was also beautiful. What are you thinking? Alexander asked. He could always read my mind. I would do it all again, I said. Every dangerous moment, because it led me here to you, even knowing what I know now. He kissed me then, slow and deep and full of promise. As we danced, I realized our happily ever after was not about being perfect. It meant choosing each other every single day. We built our relationship in a crisis, and it was strengthened by total honesty. Whatever the future held, we would face it together. We were no longer boss and assistant. We were not protector and protected. We were equals who had seen each other's worst and still chose love. The music we danced to was only for us, but it was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. The end. If this story touched your heart, Let me know in the comments. Have you ever experienced a love that changed everything? I'd love to hear your story. Hit that like button if Gabriella's journey resonated with you. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss another story. And if you know someone who needs to hear this today, share it with them. Thank you for being here with me.